Hey guys, Damo here from Market Wine Store. Today we're going to have a little chat to you about what's the difference between a $30 bottle and a $130 bottle. What goes into making it, the vineyards, the winemaking style, and also what makes it taste the way it does. And at the end of the day, is it worth spending the extra $100? A lot of vineyards are incredibly different, for where they are in certain regions. There's some vineyards that are in just better spots that have been there for a lot longer. There's a lot more vine age. With vine age comes a lot of different things. But I think realistically, let's start with where the vineyards are and why certain vineyards are better than others.
I was asked this question recently by a customer here, and it is a very complex and long-winded answer. But to give the Cliff's Notes, the really short version of it, it is because the grapes perform better.
Yeah.
And, human beings, for the most part, are pretty ingenious, and we don't continue to do something somewhere where it doesn't work well. And so when it comes to vineyards, the sites that produce the best quality of grape are the sites that don't have their vines ever pulled up.
Yeah.
And so with something like the John Duval Eligo that we have sitting in front of us, which is the more expensive of these two wines, the vine age is much older.
A lot older. Yeah.
And one thing to remember with vines as they age and as the vineyard matures is the vineyard is not going to produce as much fruit as you produce in younger.
And so therefore you get a lot more fruit concentration.
You get a lot more fruit concentration, correct, but it also means that you're producing less wine per hectare.
Correct.
Therefore, that immediately makes the value of what is being produced higher.
Yes.
And so that's one of the key things, I think, when you're looking at it. Then you're also looking at where geographically the vineyards are located. So for something like the Head Red Shiraz, which is by no means, I think that the word cheap is a dirty word. I always tell people that it is accessibly priced. And I find that you will find that with the Head Red Shiraz, the vines can be coming from almost anywhere in the Barossa region. So they can be coming from the flats of the valley, they can be coming from mid-slope, they can be coming from east-facing and west-facing sites, north-facing and south-facing. And why all these aspects matter is because it's about when the sun hits them during the day, when the heat hits them during the day, when you're getting prevailing winds that come through, how quickly the vineyard cools down, all of that sort of stuff. And as a general rule of thumb, the higher the altitude the vineyard is, the better the quality the fruit is, because you're able to get really good sun exposure because you're above, let's say, dust clouds, low-lying clouds, etc. And sunlight allows the grapes to ripen their flavor compounds as well as their tannin profile.
But it also controls acid, right?
And that's the thing. The important thing for really great wine producing regions is you get this thing that's called diurnal shift.
Yeah.
And that is the difference between the heat of the day and the cold at night. And when you're in a higher altitude site, you cool down sooner. And it's during the cold times that acidity is maintained and is produced in the grape variety. And so that's one of the key things. As I said, I've probably only touched on about 5% of the true answer to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's...
And I think the other thing that we got to think of is vine age in itself, right? And I always talk about, when I'm talking about vine age, there's a couple of things that really go into it. We spoke about before the fact that they produce less bunches. But the other thing that you got to think about is the fact that with vine age, I like to think that the older it is, there's more underneath the ground than above the ground. It's almost like a pyramid thing. So you've got a lot more root system. You got those roots accessible to more water in hot years. Can also allow for a bit of cooling in hot years because get its nutrients from underneath the ground and keep itself a little bit cooler.
Yeah.
It also is more accessible to a lot more nutrients and minerals and everything else that's going into the soil.
Yeah, that is true. And you touched on something that is the one that I think a lot of wine people don't necessarily think about, and it's water reserves. And so if you are only relying on the water reserves for a vine coming from the sky or coming from your spray bottle, then it means that you have a huge cost to that, but you also have a limited resource. The great vineyards have subsoils that have some level of water retention. And what that water retention does is it not only helps to hydrate the vines to a certain degree, but it keeps the vines, it keeps the root systems cool.
Yeah.
Because winemakers kind of want to starve the vines of water a little bit during the growing season so that they don't become, if you just think about yourself as a human being, if you drink too much water, you become lethargic and you can't really perform with the same vigor that you normally would if you're doing physical activity. And vines kind of work the same way.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it that way, it's almost like if you're trying to keep your body temperature cool, it's like dunking your feet into little ice buckets as opposed to trying to pour cold water over yourself.
Yeah.
I know that analogy might not necessarily work, but it works in my brain, and that's the only place it needed to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good other thing to say about the water reserves is you've got it when you need it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have to force it on top, the berries can suck up too much moisture if they're watered at the wrong time and all that stuff, so it can dilute the wines. There's lots of other things that can go into that. Then there's winemaking.
Yeah.
Which also plays into it. So maybe before we go there, let's talk about the fact that you're producing less vines, right? So what I like to say about head, by no means is this in any way, shape or form a worse wine. What we're trying to say is this is the best wine. So when Alex Head was making this wine, he was making it to say, I want to make the best possible wine I can for $30 so that I can put it on the shelf at $30. So he's then allowing himself to know his parameters and making a wine to a certain price point.
Yeah.
When we're making John Duval Eligo, we're going, let's make the best possible wine we can.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
But we're trying to make the best possible wine it can. So one of the things that I point out with straight away is if you're trying to make wine under a certain price point, you're probably going to allow your vines to have more fruit.
Yeah.
You're not going to pull back on the fruit. You're not going to, what's the word I'm trying to say? Crop them a lot less. You're going to allow the vineyard to produce more fruit.
Correct.
And what happens with that is you're sort of getting less concentration of fruit.
Yeah.
Naturally, you have one vine producing more bunches of fruit.
Yeah.
Versus in this one vine producing a lot less bunches of fruit. So you've got that one vine nurturing smaller amount of fruit versus a lot more fruit. So it's pretty straightforward, but I need to do it at a cost.
Yeah.
So therefore, if I allow my vineyard to produce more tons per acre, and we're also not talking crazy here.
No.
Like in maybe a really sort of great vintage, probably talking 4 to 5 ton per acre for the head red, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm from this century, so I actually use hectares, not acres.
True.
But you are correct. You are
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
We're not talking a huge, super high yielding wine region like we would be talking in Marlborough for Sauvignon Blanc, where it's about producing as many bottles as physically, or Prosecco in some regions of Italy.
Yeah.
Where they might be cropping at,
16.
hundreds of litres per hectare sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's evident in this wine as well, because when you look at what's in the glass, you can see immediately it's not watery.
No.
And it's not, it might be somewhat translucent, but there is still a core of fruit that's there. And I think that, I think that it's important, as you've just said, it's about also producing a style of fruit that's going to suit the wine.
Correct.
Because it's not necessarily about just producing fruit that's going to be below a certain dollar figure, so that therefore the wine can be below a certain dollar figure. The other thing to remember is that with something like the Head Red, you know, Alex Head had all of his inspiration came from all the vintages that he did in the Rhone Valley. And so he was looking to produce something that emulated what those great Rhone Valley wines do. And if you've had much wine from France, like we have had a bit of wine from France, you understand that they're not bombastic, brazen, brutish styles like a lot of Barossa Shiraz can be. They're made in a slightly more medium weight, pretty and finesse style, because they're made to be enjoyed younger in this sort of price bracket. And that's how this wine has been designed and has been made.
And he wants to try and emulate that year on year. As much as it's difficult to make sure that vintages are because of the differences, you're going to have differences throughout the vintages, but you want to try and make it to a style.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so then that comes from talking about vineyard management and vine selection and fruit selection, moving into winemaking decisions. And I think that there is look, the easy contrast for anyone to be able to make just looking at these two bottles with zero knowledge of wine is the fact that they are, the Eligo you're looking at here is a 2021 and the Head Red is 2023 or 2024?
Yeah.
2022. Well, it's got a little bit more age than I was expecting.
Yeah. I was trying to get them as close as I could, but yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but
he knows his stuff. And so the thing is the reason why, you know, this is actually released a lot younger. So is this the current release for the Head Red? I thought that this would be maybe a year or two old now.
I think that's probably a year or two old.
A year or two old. But we know that this Eligo is almost a fresh release for this wine.
Correct.
And that has to do with how long the wine is matured in the winery after fermentation before it's released. And so we know that John Duval wines with the Eligo is going to be aged for a minimum of 18 months in oak, you know, sometimes 24 months in oak prior to being released.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't see that same sort of winemaking undertaken with the Head Red. And the way to think about it is at the moment that you are sitting on an asset like your wine, like the harvest that you've just brought in, if you're sitting on it for an extra year, an extra 2 years, an extra 3 years, that's time that it is costing you money to be able to mature that wine, to get it to the level that you want it to get to.
But also the accountants are saying you've got this stock that you haven't sold yet, right? So it's a cost to the business to be able to hold on to all of those wines, all of that wine from that vineyard for so long. So it's actually a cost benefit for you to be able to get it out the door faster because you're not holding on to the stock.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's lots of other little decisions that get made throughout the winemaking process, right? So I would say that this has had the top selection of the vineyards that he's got accessible to.
Yeah.
So he's picking the best fruit that he's got from the best vineyards that he's got.
Yeah.
Then it's going into premium oak.
Yeah.
And we're talking at least $2,000 a barrel for premium oak. Minimum. And then only the best of those barrels. So the ferments that he liked the most, the wines that have been produced the best out of those best barrels go into his.
Yeah. And then they have to be able to balance each other when he blends them to be able to make a style that people have you know, customers have come to be used to. And they have to be of a quality that customers or drinkers and collectors are expecting. Yeah. And you know that I buy this wine every year. I buy quite a few bottles of this every year because it's a great one to open with almost anyone. I was telling Damo before we sat down, I had a bottle of this a week and a half ago because it is extraordinary. So you were talking about Vineyard Sources, the best quality fruit. So what John Duval does for his Eligo, because he understands that as Australians, we kind of want to drink a little bit sooner rather than later. He actually blends this as a combination of Barossa Valley fruit and a combination of Eden Valley fruit.
Yeah.
And you can see the duality in that wine there because it's got structure and it's got depth and it's got a great concentration of flavour. but there is a softness to the tannin profile that I think sort of sets it apart from a lot of its contemporaries at a similar price point. Yeah.
And it's got
really
that
impressive.
beautiful lifted fruit that you expect out of Eden Valley, right? And you know, for me, there's depth in that wine. There's a lot more things like olive tapenade. There's a lot more of those tertiary characteristics that us wine nerds talk about a fair bit. Not taking away from the head, because the head at a $30 price point is fresh. It's got all those beautiful red fruits that you want out of Barossa. It's not jammy.
No.
You know, and I think that's a big thing that I like to say. There's a lot of Barossa fruit can be that jammy, almost cloyne-esque. It's fresh. There's beautiful fruit there. It's drinking. It's what I call a barbecue wine. It's one of those wines where you just want to, you just find yourself going back for more because it is moreish and delicious.
Yeah. The way that I see it with that wine, making the comparison to the sort of style that you can get from some Barossa or South Australian Shiraz. With this, you're getting bright, detailed, precise fruit character. And in some of those that you're speaking about, you almost get this fruit character that is like someone has taken blackberry jam, mixed it with melted chocolate, and then removed a little bit of sugar. And that's kind of how that jammy character sort of sits for me. Whereas this does feel like you're tasting bright, fresh fruit character.
Yeah.
Which I think makes it quite detailed and really quite pretty. And I think it's very impressive for its price category. Very impressive. But there is no doubt that it just doesn't have the same level of concentration and complexity as you're seeing in the Eligo.
And I think when you look at the fruit concentration, but you also look at structure. For me, we all talk about the idea of tannins. And yes, it's got beautiful tannins. It's got the structure there. But it's got that ability to be bright and fresh and crunchy and crisp. Whereas this, the tannins, there's more tannins, but they're layered and they're deep and they're, so molded into the wine. The fruit, the complexity, all of those tertiary, those secondary characteristics that are going on. And I'm not talking about age characteristics. I'm talking about tertiary, just different levels. There's different nuances in the wine that sit there. The fruit, you can really, it's almost to me like, when you, lack of better words, it's sort of you bite into a raspberry or a strawberry that you've bought from the supermarket that have been sitting on the shelf or been gassed into existence versus picking that beautiful fresh strawberry you can really tell the difference and that beautiful power that you get from the fruit.
It might work to just explain quickly what we're talking about when we're talking about secondary and tertiary and fruit aromas. So basically, any bottle of wine that you open has 3 distinct buckets or characteristics that you would characterize the flavors that you taste. So the one that most people think about and that most people can recognize is what we call primary characteristics. And so when we're talking about bright, fresh fruit, when people are talking about how they smell floral characters like rose petals and tulips and lavender, when you hear people talking when they're drinking something like Chablis and they're talking about mineral and flintiness and crushed rocks, etc., these are what we call primary characteristics. And these characters come from the grapes themselves. And they can be enhanced depending on how the wine is made. But generally speaking, that is a product of what is grown as opposed to what is done to the wine. Secondary characteristics that we sometimes talk about are things like in Chardonnay, when people talk about they like buttery, oaky, creamy Chardonnays, or in red wines we talk about wanting oaky wines, or we want something that's got a chocolatey richness to it. Those characteristics are what's called secondary characteristics, and they are imparted into the wine and through the fruit by winemaking decisions. So whether you decide to, using a technical term, put the wine through malolactic fermentation, whether you decide to use decide to
Have
block
a char
any
on a
a
barrel.
char on a barrel or block any use of oxygen in the winemaking process. That's what these winemaking decisions, they're the characters they impart into the wines. And then you mentioned it before, tertiary characteristics. And so tertiary character basically comes from generally it comes from bottle age, but it is essentially just time from vintage.
Yeah.
And so for something like a 2021 Eligo, like we're tasting here, there's not necessarily a huge amount of tertiary character, but it is what's adding that extra layer
Yeah.
to the wine. And that's when you're talking about dried fruit. So dried raisins and figs and prunes, or dried raspberries, etc. Or you're talking about, if you ever hear people talking about it's got leather or varnish or wood smoke or cigar box. They love that one, the wine critics,
Yeah.
talking about Bordeaux. Love talking about tobacco and cigar box and cedar. That's what those characters are, and they develop with time in the bottle. And you know, I can appreciate those, but for me, I like it to just be an extra layer to the wine and not be what overtakes the wine. And that's why I think that South Australian red wine is so well suited to the Australian palate, because we like it when there's a little bit of sweetness in our wines.
Absolutely. And we like that fruit forwardness, and we like that plushness
Yeah.
that you get. And I think one of the other things to talk about when we talk about the difference in quality, for me, it's about the lingeringness of the palate. So
I'm not spitting that.
general, no, I was thinking the same thing before. I had a sip and I was like, yeah, I'm not spitting that one either. But you have a sip. So like the head, you have a sip, it sits there, stays there for a while, but then it dissipates. Whereas the Eligo, it just stays there, and you can taste it minutes later.
And goes and goes.
Yeah, and it's long, and there's so much flavour there, and it just holds on to its flavour.
So there was one other thing that I just wanted to quickly touch on, which we spoke about. We spoke about tannin, but just in case people are wondering what tannin is. So tannin is basically, it is a chemical compound, and it is an organic compound that is found in a number of different places in wine, from the contributing factors to wine. Generally speaking, when we talk about tannin, it's usually derived predominantly from the skins of the grapes. But there are other sources. You can get them from stems, you can get them from seeds, and you can get them from oak, which would be secondary tannin. And so the reason that we talk about it and what to look for if you're trying something like this and you want to understand what is this tannin that you're talking about, think about the way it feels in your mouth. So a lot of the time we talk about what a wine tastes like, but it's almost more important what a wine feels like.
100%.
Because the tannin is that kind of furry, I think like massaging on your gums characteristic. And what that does is that's one of the key things that allows wine to pair with food. And whilst this is so delicious, you don't need to have it with food. If you put that with a good cut of steak, it's got a little bit of fattiness for the tannin to be able to latch onto, you're going to unlock flavour in both the wine and in the meat that you might not have tasted before.
And the other side to that is that mixed with the acid structure in that wine as well. I think when I talk about really well-made wine, to me it's about balance.
Yeah.
And I talk about it with food. I talk about it with the, with everything else that goes with anything you put in your mouth, really, is the fact that you need it to be balanced. So when you talk about making a dish, you want something, say it's a steak, you need something with the sauce that's going to cut through it, so on and so forth. With this, it's the same thing, that fattiness, you want that tannin, you want that acid to cut through it. If you're making a curry, for example, you need those spices to all marry up and to be balanced. Otherwise,
you don't want ice cream with garlic.
No. You've got to be out. So really well-made wine sits in this Goldilocks spot where the acid, the tannin, the fruit, everything is all in this one spot. And it's just balanced and it's perfect and it feels right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like, we talk in the wine game a bit about arms and legs and things like that. Sometimes you can taste a wine and it's a bit pokey.
Yeah.
Just doesn't feel 100% right.
You know, there was something that was, I was told by a really good winemaker within my first 12 months working in the wine industry. And he said that one of the biggest tricks that people will play on customers or play on other people that are trying to learn about wine is telling them this wine doesn't taste good now, but it will be good in the future.
Yeah.
And he told me, and I always use this quote, great wine is always great.
Yes.
It just gets better.
Correct.
And this is the embodiment of that.
Yeah.
This is a great wine now. It will be a great wine in 5 years, and it will probably be a great wine in 20 years as well.
Yeah.
Because it has balance. And when things are balanced, they taste good.
I remember listening to Jancis Robinson always say, bad wine with age is still going to be bad wine. 100%. Just to wrap it up there, I think the main points to take away, Alex makes fantastic wines. He's trying to make a wine to a price point, to a style, which we need in the market.
Yep.
You know, we absolutely need it because...
Can't drink this every day.
No, absolutely not, right?
Wish
but
we could.
in those special occasions, if you want to push the budget out a little bit, if you want to put something down to cellar, there's a reason why wine with a higher price tag generally is better. And I like to use the word generally there because that's not always the case. There are some wines that with a big high price tag that aren't necessarily that good. But here at Market Wine Store in particular, we will focus on getting the best value wine we can at the price that it's at. And that's what it's all about. So if you come in here and you're buying a $30 bottle of wine, we're going to give you the best $30 bottle of wine we can. Yep. But if you're happy to spend a little bit more, there's a reason why you want to spend a bit more.
Yeah.
You really can see the difference in the wine. I know Alex makes fantastic top stuff, so please look at Heads, all of his top single vineyard
Long,
wines.
the brunette, the red head is one of the great Shiraz made in South Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, John Duval, head winemaker for Penfolds for a very, very, very long time, has gone out on his own, has access to some of the greatest vineyards in the Barossa. He does make a fantastic wine.
He does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.